This is what we need to do. This is going to bring that school to the next level.
That's Thinkering. This Thinkering process is going to be really transformational to all subjects that we're talking about.
The value of the Alliance is it's a thinking collective. Now we have a greater understanding amongst everyone. And that's not what's common in schools.
I always tell our students this can set you apart, make you stand out, something to remember you by. It's an opportunity to share. It's win-win all around.
I think the biggest part of what we do are the humans that we work with on the other side of that, right? Really see the human impact, the way that they're interacting and working with their community.
It really does have to flip. You should be able to think about that as your hero's journey, to be able to know this is how I was able to overcome.
And they really have this drive to want change. And I feel like continuing that mission is really important.
Garrett, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Thinkering Minds Podcast, where we explore stories and education. Garrett, you're the CEO and founder of Creative Gardens and the Gardens Foundation. I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about those organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jim. And this is so exciting to be on the podcast. And my name is Garrett Wilhelm, as Jim said, and I am the CEO of Creative Gardens Early Education. We are a preschool company that owns currently 8 on-the-ground schools, but 13 in development in total. And then I am the founder of the Gardens Foundation, and we have a 2-part mission. The first is to be the connector of amazing minds across the world, all really that are pushing forward the future of education. And then the second part is to do the actual research on the ground to inform future learning and what a future learner will need 20 years from now.
When we talk about just starting off with the foundations and philosophy of Creative Gardens, what got you started there, and what was the kind of 2 a.m. moment where you realized you had to be the person to jump in and make change?
I actually have that. It's a great question, and I actually had that moment. But for me, I grew up in school and I did okay. I was neurodiverse in the fact that I had ADHD that I recognized later on in life, but I kind of got by. And at 15, cue the tiny violins, my dad died. And ultimately, that was when I experienced the disconnection of talking about humanization, the humanization of learning. No one factored that into my educational experience. And ultimately, it had a dramatic effect. My grades tanked. And in fact, I have on my wall here in my office, my home office, my report card from senior year. I graduated with a 1.8. And the reason I have it framed on my wall is because it was no reflection of who I am and how I learn. And so I took that into my life. It became my life's passion to really inform education in a broader sense. And that started with a career in Montessori education. I was a teacher for many years. And then I became a director and head of schools. And then I became a regional director. And ultimately, then I founded my first school. It was called Berthold Academy, and it was in Reston, Virginia. And our goal was to kind of modernize Montessori. And it turned into something way bigger when we filed a application to be a beta partner with this company called Alt School, which was the company getting the most funding to build what we now know as personalized learning, and ultimately one of the first learning management systems. And so it inspired me to think bigger than just modernizing Montessori, but modernizing education. And I always thought in my head, can I take this into early learning? We were working with K through 12 at the time, but I knew the foundational learning that happens through my Montessori career in those early years, the permanent learning that happens in the first 7 years of life based on neuroscience and research. And so that began Creative Gardens. And it started as this kind of shot in the dark idea to create a school with some of the kind of metacognition that I was thinking about and some of the stuff that we had applied over at Alt School. And, finding money and all of that, I ended up partnering with Gymboree Play and Learn, which is an early learning company that makes kids clothes and then ultimately learning centers, to build their brand in co-ownership and have full control over designing every aspect of that brand. And so, our preschools are all about personalized learning and what that scaffolding looks like at an early age. And so it's always been a fascination of mine. But I think, there are people that have ideas out there and those are easy, but then there are people that execute those ideas. And that is the really, really, really challenging part. And I've always said, like, I really love a good challenge. And so I'm going to do anything I can to inform that.
Yes, absolutely. When your school draws on Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and Waldorf approaches, can you give a layman like me kind of an overview of what those are and then how do they impact the education?
Yeah, absolutely. So Montessori, obviously, as a Montessori teacher, I was inspired by, she was Italy's first female scientist, and she worked with special needs children to develop this method that worked with them. And then ultimately she found that it worked with developing children. So she worked with, not called at the time, autistic children, and found that a lot of success was derived in physical understanding of education rather than just talking at people, providing experiences that heighten and enhance all of the senses to which children learn at a young age. And so we have Montessori materials in our classrooms, using as, materials that all educators can use to teach the subjects they need to teach in the classroom. We also encourage what Montessori absolutely loved, which was independence. And so we encourage independence in our classrooms in every aspect through what she called practical life, but they're everyday activities that children do that help inform not just those skills, but then ultimately precursors to literacy and math and organization. Reggio, a guy named Loris Malaguzzi out of the same area as Montessori, iterated on Montessori and came up with what he called the 100 Languages of Learning. And I encourage everyone to read that book because it is a book by Loris Malaguzzi, and it discusses basically the early idea that every child learns differently. And then, of course, someone like Gardner comes along and, builds upon that idea and really helps to push that forward. But for me, it's a constructivist way of learning. It's allowing children to have agency in their learning, and it's embracing things like provocations. And I always give the example of, like, rather than having an art project that you're going step by step through, have all of the art materials out on a table with a picture of the finished project and say nothing and watch the learning happen. So a lot of what we do when it comes to Reggio has to do with that, provocational coupled with bringing the outdoors in. So some of the counters that we have in our classrooms are collected in nature, acorns, things like that, connecting children to nature in that sense. Now, Waldorf, developed by Rudolf Steiner, very much, Montessori was all about realism. So you don't see a lot of toys in Montessori classrooms, whereas Waldorf was all about the magic of childhood, right? Talking about fairies and talking about connecting these kind of really fascinating things for early age kids to learning, arts, trade. All of those things are big in Waldorf schools. And so ultimately for us, we incorporate that through allowing for dress up areas, toys, kitchens in classrooms alongside Montessori materials, which, if you're a Montessori teacher out there listening, you're probably going to kill me, because if you're, fully focused in on that philosophy and believe in it wholeheartedly, then that even a dinosaur in a classroom would be called a representation of a dinosaur. It wouldn't be called a dinosaur. So to give you that kind of understanding of those specific three, but then of course, we kind of look at it as an and conversation. Education to me is, Montessori and Waldorf and Reggio. It's not or in those situations, because I look at educators as prescribing meaningful, personalized learning to kids and providing a toolkit to those educators so that there's no barrier to that access.
Talking about your GPA up on the wall, my claim to fame, similar sorts, is I graduated high school without turning in a single homework assignment. I didn't really have to study because I was interested in material and I liked to learn. So I learned it on my own, in my own ways. And it got to a point where my track and field coach would literally make me run laps if I didn't turn in homework in classes, and that still didn't deter me. I carried that attitude for far too long. I was an antagonistic student, but I love to learn, and that's when I hear people like you talk about prescribing solutions and offering tools and paths. That's what I was missing in my education. Was I really needed the freedom to explore, go about it my way, and just told, here's the end result. You got to get here, figure it out. And I would have loved that.
Yeah, because ultimately you might come up with, and that's where, we were talking offline about ego and education. That's where ego comes in and really destroys things, is that teachers have been taught even in school, in higher education, in college, to establish a control dynamic in the classroom. And, for them, they go in and they have their administrators tell them that you have to teach X, Y, and Z, and you have to do it in this structure. And then for them to allow for that to happen, they then have to recreate somewhat of a control structure within their classroom. But the reality is that's where the shift in education comes, is it really does have to flip to where the child is allowed to openly explore their environment, whether that be a classroom, whether that be, a museum, whatever it may be. And then educators can help facilitate that discovery, and really watch and observe. And these are the keys and fundamentals to personalized learning, is through observation and data. Get out of the way, watch what kids can do. Like you said, give them a problem, and then have these kids figure out the solution, and don't give them, all the answers. I always think about like leadership, like a fox leads a pack. It doesn't lead from the front, it leads from the back. Because if you lead from the front, you're blinding the view of everyone else. If you lead from the back, you can still go, hey kids, don't go there, because that's going to be trouble. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to be a problem. You can say, like, you can allow for exploration, and more so allow for what I look at as innovation. You might have a kid in 9th grade that comes up with a solution to a problem that you never even thought that direction, but they have to be given the freedom to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. The freedom, I think, is the bottom line to all of it. If you can give a child, limited fencing and general direction, but let them have the freedom to run and explore, they're going to do really, really powerful, impressive things. At Thinkering Collective, one of our taglines is curiosity propels change. And at Creative Gardens, you all prioritize experiential learning. I'm teaching by doing rather than telling. So those tie in really well together. Can you share examples of how this approach is brought to life in your classrooms?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, it is. I mean, especially from our preschool age up. So we have preschool, we have kindergarten prep, which is 4 to 5 year olds. And this year we introduced to kindergarten, which to me is our full expression of what we do. And so there's a cool thing that happens when you incorporate experiential learning into your programs is you get the opportunity to connect with outside industry, because that's really what it's all about is, learning should be applied to the real world. And if it's done right, then kids will absorb that experience in every single sense possible, but it has to be relevant, right? And I think that's really important. So it involves whatever school or learning institution to really dive into the community and even lean into the parents of the community to say, can we give these kids experiences based on what you do every day that are enriching and fulfilling and show value? And so, for me, it's things like, especially with social emotional learning, we do a ton of community events. We do not just like your typical standard ones. We have big parties for the community at my schools, where the whole community comes out. There's moon bounces, there's entertainers. Those entertainers are people from the community. We have vendors come up, and put up their tents. We have food trucks that come in. It becomes this real community hub, because when you're teaching kids social emotional learning values, it's not like you said, you have to show them, not tell them. And so you have to show them the value of community by, getting back to what we all saw as kids, which was the power of community, the ability for us to lean on each other and trust each other to know that, like, at least this group has each other's backs. But we have to show kids that. And so there's the community side of that for social emotional. And then for the academic learning, what I love is that we give our educators a ton of freedom at the school. So they can create their own thematic learning, meaning their own themes every month, week, and then they can web those themes into experiential learning moments based on those themes. So we've had kids go to data centers. We've had kids go to the water processing plant close to us. We've had kids go to a restaurant. We've had kids go all over the community to really put their hands on what the community does, because I think it's so important. And in all of those experiences, if you're a great educator, you're looking for the most powerful moments, which are teachable moments. You're looking for those moments to jump in and go, hey, remember when we talked about half and quarter? Well, at this pizza restaurant we're at, look how they're halving the pizza and putting them into quarters. Why would they do that? Well, everybody needs an equal slice, right? Yeah, of course they do. So those conversations become much more meaningful. The other thing, not to get long-winded because I'm obsessed with it, but having a garden, creative gardens, that's part of our model for our schools, is that we have a garden to table program. So we have to have a little bit of land. We've gotten creative at some, but at my location in Ashburn, Virginia, where I live, we have 3.5 acres by design. So we grow food. And from 2 years old in our school, really from infants, kids' hands are in dirt and they are seeing the process of nature and science and the life cycles. They're trying new foods as such. They are learning measurement. There's so many different things that you can do in real world application in a world that Jim and I were talking about offline is connected less and less and less due to the onset of things like social media and AI. AI is great, but AI should be used to make more connective moments happen human to human.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on two pillars there, the academic pillar and the social emotional pillar. And I really agree on the academic pillar. It's important to teach kids how to think, not what to think. And when you're talking about the gardening program, to me, that's so cool. They're getting to build something that they see grow. They're probably, a lot of them, holding real foods versus processed foods in their hands for the first understanding. Oh, the Cheez-It cracker it doesn't grow from the ground.
That's such a good point, man.
Yeah. All of those important things from that one experience. And then you get to tie it back into community in the real world. How do you involve families in setting and tracking goals for that crucial aspect of a child's development?
That is such a great question. And first of all, before I get to that, I wanted to shout out, you talk about critical thinking. I have a friend, this guy, Will Roosh, he's out of California, and his entire teaching career was focused on viewpoint diversity. Exactly what you're talking about is Socratic method of constant questioning, and how do we through line that through multiple different curricula across multiple different subject matters so that kids come out of school thinking critically and having ability and logic. So I'll give him a plug here. Will Roosh, if you're listening, which I'm going to share this with you, so you are going to be listening, you're doing great work and keep it up. His program's called Patterdocs, which is super interesting. But to get to your point, one of the things we do in goal setting, because that's something I've worked deeply on, even working with alt school, on how to quantify social emotional learning and really how to, show effective change based on the goals that we do set. And, as much as we want to complicate things with things like the WHOOP format from Character Labs out of Harvard, or as much as we want to build, it really comes down to, let's sit down with the family. Let's show them in a transparent way. My school documents learning, so the parents see in real time what's going on in the classroom constantly. It creates a trust and transparency so that we can sit down and say, what are we worried about here? Do we see that this child is immature for their age and that they, need to work on empathy or compassion, so that we establish those goals, even in a narrative base, even if we're just talking and then documenting, but we can show growth through documentation, through what we call learning evidence, through moments, where Timmy just picked up Judy off the ground out of nowhere. And let's say Timmy was struggling with empathy. Well, all of a sudden that shows growth in empathy. So we can show via this documentation that the child is growing in this way, and still, because I think education, especially at the early age, you get a lot of, for lack of a better term, bullshit, in the sense of you get a lot of smoke and mirrors from your school because they don't want to have the confrontational or direct conversations about the hard stuff. And I think if you can open the door in transparency and be okay with still being kind, but having hard conversations sometimes, trust is built. And with trust, you can actually move the needle forward. Otherwise, you're just talking about social emotional learning. It's what's happening in our public schools. It's like, let's talk to kids about empathy, but let's do it where they're in an assembly hall and one person is talking at them with the word blown up behind them. Well, we know that that's not how kids learn. So what are we doing? We're checking a box. We're not actually doing it. And so for me, it's about, yeah, I'm sure there's some really awesome tool that quantifies social emotional growth, but at the end of the day, social emotional learning value is human. So it should be human to humans, establishing what we need to do with this kiddo. What things do we need to build on to get them prepared for school or, anecdotally for their learning path. And then, being able to share with all stakeholders the learning outcomes, even if they're negative. You should have the documentation there to make sure that you can show why you're saying what you say. Otherwise, you're just asking parents to blindly trust you. And as you and I both know, I didn't trust a single teacher at school. I looked at them as, and wrongfully so, and it's funny that I'm in education, but as the enemy.
Yeah, for me, it was always like a teacher could be my friend and we could chop it up and have a good time in class and blah, blah, blah. But I knew they were limited to what they could teach. And I knew that if I was interested in that, I'd already learned it. So, we'll just go.
Mind you guys, I'm going to jump in, Jim, and say this dude is smart. If you have the opportunity to talk to Jim, he knows his stuff about the things that he knows. And that, to me, there needs to be more people in the world that go all in on the things that they're interested in, because then work doesn't feel like work. And that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, every day is play. With the traditional classroom setting, we talked about, one size does not fit all, yet they're oftentimes set up in a way that they can only teach in a one size fits all format.
That's right.
You all go with a very personalized learning approach that meets the diverse needs of a student body. With those unique challenges, what do you think that the education system can take away from what you all are doing?
It's another great question. I think if they could learn one thing, is that failure is okay, that grades mean nothing. And I'll say that again, grades mean nothing. That, going back to what you said, that how is much important than what. And my job with the Gardens Foundation is to research the future of learning. And what we're learning through that research is that the future lies in soft skills and critical thinking and logic. It doesn't hey guys, we all have these. They are not going away. I also, mind you, have this, right? These things are not going away. They're getting more and more and more sophisticated. And we have to be comfortable with content knowledge being something that can just be pulled, and innovative thought and connection and collaboration is the future.
I think tapping into those personalized student journeys beyond just how do you get the grade and pass the test, but where do you want to go in life and what do you want to do, and having that dictate how you're learning is like the missing bridge.
It really is. And it does come down to, again, coming back to the research that we're doing, is the only way in which we're going to see that in the classroom is by starting with the educators, by starting at the top. It's kind of a two-parter thing. You have to create a movement, which is what I think the Thinkering Collective will do. I feel very confident about that. Coming from the bottom with educators, with the storytelling of the magic of what's actually happening in classrooms across the world, coupled with how do we change the mindset of an educator where the system really has to be flipped on its side. I kind of dream of a world where the report card is flipped around, where you have, social skills as the main aspect, and then you have a little box at the bottom with the academic ability, the basic academic ability, because that's really, I always challenge people, how much of your degree do you use in your everyday life? I'll dare even say this, how much do you even remember? Not much, my friend. And that goes for everyone.
Well, even with a college degree, I started off in IT, loved it, hit a Java class where the teacher came in day one and said, nobody's going to make higher than a C in this class, I guarantee it. And that killed my drive to be an IT major, because you're telling me I'm set up to fail on day one. And then I thought, well, I don't like math. I'll get a BA in political science. That'll be useful. So it's like, once again, another piece of paper that really didn't mean anything for life. It was just, can read a book and regurgitate it.
That's exactly right. And the thing that my stepdad told me once was, and I still believe it to this day, you know, the value of a college education these days, it of course is contextual to what you want to do, talking about reverse engineering. It does show that you're capable of achieving something, right? And I think there is value in that, but we can replicate that experience and have in really any future, you know, career. There might be people that absolutely love being outside and working. There are people that absolutely love that. So what does a learning path to that look like? You know, it's not the same as an IT learning path. It just isn't. And so what if we focused more on what that looks like? And I guarantee you that path is probably shorter. That's probably shorter to a job than other paths, you know, because a lot of it is hands-on learning and doing and experiential learning. But God, I dream of a world where we're incessantly focused on, you know, what kids are passionate about and allowing them to experience the world. I mean, especially with the technology that's coming, giving them the opportunity to put them into so many different experiences so that that can inform like, oh, I'm really good at this. Because I always think about like how many kids are out there that one teacher said, you're going to get a C in this class, that totally got deferred from an industry that they would have been phenomenal in, right?
That's my story.
I want to find that guy. Hey, dude. I mean, you obviously know his name.
Shout out to Yao Lee.
There you go. Anyway, moving on.
We talked about collaborative environment and how it's so crucial for students. But one thing I think that doesn't get touched on enough is collaboration with educators and working, you know, their side of things, and how can one teacher who's focused on a totally different subject matter still be teaching in a way that's uplifting another teacher's material. How do you guys address that at Creative Gardens?
It's an interesting take, to be honest with you. You know, I think for early learning, there's a lot of performative aspects to our industry. And to be a good teacher, you have to almost be a good actor because you're presenting things. And I think that could go all the way up, right? Like my favorite teacher, Mr. Greenberg in 7th grade, history teacher, painted pictures in the classroom that put me there, you know, in the Civil War and inspired me to be an educator. So the way we kind of do that is through, you know, improv, you know, and making sure that they're always on their toes to ensure that they can allow for those meaningful learning moments to happen. So, you know, for us, it's always about one, ensuring that they're okay making a complete fool out of themselves, because that's part of the gig. And then two, like I also look at things like professional development as prescriptive. Well, what's going on in your classroom? All right, well, let's find out some people that know a lot about that and then plug you in. And then so you can have really meaningful stuff going on. Because there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of, you know, teachers that check marks, you know, that go online and click through professional development packets and then just get the certificate and call it a day. How can we make sure that we're encouraging an environment of, you know, what we want to see with our learners, which is to never stop learning?
Yeah, hopefully that the Thinkering Collective Fellowship will be able to create something that is an experience that can't just be checkbox, checked it off, but people are going to actually be creating capstone projects that hold real world value.
Well, it's inspiring too. You know, I think teachers need a fire in their ass, for lack of a better term, to reignite the reasons why they educate. Otherwise, get out. That's my perspective. If you're not in it for the right reasons, get out. Because like we said, like the outcome of destroying a child's life because of your ego, you know, destroying the path of a child or stoking a potential genius in a field, like, who are you? That's my position.
Yeah, it should be a position of empowering others and service, which it is, service industry. Well, you've described Creative Gardens as mile 1 of a marathon to reshape education. What does mile 2 look like?
This is good. Mile 2 to me looks like refinement. It really looks like right now in Creative Gardens, we've built a school and a school system that doesn't look and feel like another school system. And that to me was my goal, especially in my space where, you know, you copy paste experiences onto different brand names, you know, the blah, 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 the blah, blah, blah. They're all very, very, very similar experiences because those experiences work more so financially than anything. And for us, what does a school look like when you root every decision and what's best for the child? Yes, you still have to operate a business. Yes, you still have to make sure that the thing scales up, but can we be good people and operate a good business was our question. And so mile 2 for me is about taking what we've learned and applying it and really getting down to, because it's a two-parter. One, we have to inform education that's progressive, that prepares kids for 20 years from now. And 2, we have to support educators who have to relearn and be retaught and unlearn a lot of what we do. So for me, mile 2 is kind of taking the 3 businesses, because I didn't mention I do have an AI company called EdStart. We build products for teachers to free up time, but it's about taking that full circle and really using it as a powerhouse to push forward.
The non-obvious benefit of a teacher with more free time. The obvious benefits, just more time spent on the students. What's the non-obvious benefit there?
A lack of burnout, in my opinion. Rest. It's common fodder to say that an educator has more positions than any other job. That they're a therapist, they're an educator, they're a nurse, they're a million different aspects and ultimately, I think teachers, and what we've learned from our educators specifically, is to keep teachers happy, you need to show them, not just tell them, show them that you support them. Be there when things are hard. Relationships aren't defined when things are easy. Relationships are defined when the shit hits the fan, and how are you going to show up? And really value their time, and their job, because it's really important. My administration in all my schools really stands up for our team, because boundaries can be created not just for your team, but it can be created for your parents in a school as well too, to protect your educators from getting overwhelmed.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of crossover in burnout in the healthcare industry and education industry, the 2 places where I just really see that as like a focal point, both industries of service. We talked about mile 2 just then. What does the end product look like when the education system has been transformed? What does that look like to you?
That's a big question. So the system to me, one, and I've only got certain aspects of it in my mind figured out, and I think that's the fun of it. Talk about love the process. I love kind of learning and being proven wrong and keeping curious. But I think school to me looks like, at the beginning, foundationally, children learn a foundational set of skills that everyone needs, right? That the basic skills that are fundamental to success in education. And then it really is about providing as many experiential experiences to a child, creating frameworks that hone children in on the things that they love and are good at. And it's also flexible enough to know that those things iterate over time. So, a path in a child's learning should not look the same as the one next to them. And mind you, we have great teachers and educators, but we still have to play to the standards. We still have to work towards this old way, which is the reason why it hasn't happened yet. And that's what I love about, too, the Thinkering Collective, is like our goal overall, and for us as partners there, is to help to create that full circle, so that it's not just, hey, we're coming up with innovative ways to meet these standards. There's a whole new set of standards, and there's a whole new way of going about this, is kind of our goal. And so that to me is the end outcome, which is, can we inspire kids to believe that the world needs who they were made to be?
Wow, that's beautifully said there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. What's been the most rewarding aspect for you? You've been an educator and an entrepreneur. What's that moment where the 2 bridged together and really created that rewarding experience?
Oh, man, you know what? It's actually somewhat recently that I had one of those moments of like, holy shit. Because I don't know if you're the same way, Jim, but I don't really look back. Like, I'm always really trying to look forward, almost obsessively. But, for me, I've always come from the outside education world, talking about educators being the enemy when I was growing up. Recently, I spoke to a group of educators at Loudoun County Public Schools, which is the school system close to me, and got to speak to them about some of the same things that we're talking about now. Where is the future of learning going? And it was amazing and full circle for me to be respected in an environment, talking to educators that I once deemed the problem, that I now see hope in, that I now feel empathy for, that I can go in and kind of bring this kind of full circle moment of who would have ever thought the kid that graduated with a 1.8 would be speaking to a group of educators about what they need to be doing to inform the future of learning. So for me, it was this like whole full circle meta, like, oh my God moment talking. And honestly, Jim, and again, people can make fun of me all they want. I got in my car and kind of broke down a little bit because, I take pride in what I've done. And, specifically talking about, even for me, ADHD, specifically that it was twice as hard in a lot of cases to get things done in a world that didn't see you as a different type of learner or an innovator or that could be a superpower if honed in the right direction. It's even more appreciative now that I went through that struggle.
When you talk about anyone who's really looking to make an impact in the lives of young learners, whether it's parents, educators, organizations and groups, what's the key advice that you would give to them as somebody who's created something from nothing and found success?
That's exactly. And I use that same line, create something from nothing, because that's really what entrepreneurship is and innovation is in general. But what I would say is, what I tell my educators is the most valuable lesson. Show them, don't tell them. Show them. And take that as a macro advice. Show them, don't tell them. Because the moment you have to sit there and tell them, you're part of, mind you, not intentionally, you're part of the problem. To be a great educator, I'm sorry, you have to be a good person. And if you're not a good person, cool, work on it. Because you working on it shows your kids that they have the ability to fail, learn, and grow. So less talking, more doing.
Absolutely. Garrett, thank you for sharing your vision with us and the incredible work you've done at Creative Gardens. Before we wrap up, how can our listeners find you, your three ventures, and support what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. And thank you for the opportunity for coming on here. It's amazing to be able to, one, watch Thinkering's inception, right? It's super inspiring. And then two, just to have the ability to share my vision for what I think the future looks like has been amazing. But you guys can find me on social media. I'm all over the place. What is Smart Podcast? You can find that on YouTube. I interview amazing humans across the world about that very question. You can also find me on social media at Garrett Wilhelm on Facebook, LinkedIn. It's at Wilhelm Garrett on TikTok. That's where my biggest following is. I do a lot of parenting content and education content there that people get a lot of value out of. You can visit getedstart.com to see the tools that we've built, as well as creativegardensva.com. You can see the school system and everything that we do there. So I hope that's everything. I think it is.
If not, we'll put all the links in the description. Thanks again, Garrett, and to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep thinkering.
Love the term thinkering, and we'll definitely use it in my classroom. The kids will love it.
This is where we can be that peer support network with each other. When the big picture clicks, it's beautiful when you get administrators and teachers together.
You can't be a leader of other people if you can't first lead yourself, right?
Helps the educator have a very clear and structured framework.
Becomes this real community hub. If you're a great educator, you're looking for the most powerful moment. Can we inspire kids to believe that the world needs who they were made to be?
I hope you guys continue to uphold that legacy and continue, finding kids like you.